The Coalition Expeditionary Force emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, hundreds of Azure-hulled cruisers flanked by swarms of attack ships and orbital bombardment platforms. They had voyaged many light-years to reach this unremarkable system, homeworld to an aggressive young race known as humanity. Ancient galactic prophecies told of a bipedal, sack-skinned species from an obscure planet that would rise to threaten all life. There were murmurs amongst the crew that the omens told of old now moved against them. Regardless, the Coalition fleet, Admiral ordered the advance upon the third planet as the Armada's weapons systems charged with ominous intent. There could be no mercy. The xenopsychologist warned these humans must be eradicated quickly before spreading like a virulent plague across the stars. Titanic kinetic projectiles were launched toward population centers as invasion squadrons prepared to sweep over major cities. Billions of humans perished in apocalyptic firestorms as the Coalition sought to decapitate this upstart race, eliminating Terra's dominant species in one swift stroke before it could infest the wider galaxy. As radioactive storms raged across Earth's corpse-strewn wastelands, producer dropships soon descended to claim vital resource sites and infrastructure. Scout teams in sleek aerodynes began dynamic saturation patrols to hunt down human holdouts taking refuge underground or in remote wilderness redoubts. Other Coalition engineers worked quickly to establish nucleonic fission pylons at optimal locations, ready to glass refractory human enclaves once located. But as Scout aerodynes failed to return from missions over the blackened cities and Cyclopean ruins, the Coalition fleet admiral again felt a trill of unease at the ancient prophecies. Perhaps they were now working towards a darker end. In a deep bunker under the shattered ruins of Vienna, a battle-scarred man welcomed new arrivals into the headquarters of the United Human Resistance Force. Colonel Arkady Markov shook hands firmly with Australian survivalists, Filipino hyperguerrillas, Maasai lion hunters, Lakota ghost dancers alongside dozens of other battered remnants from around the world. Ancient national and ethnic hatreds were swiftly buried under the urgent need for unity against the alien invader. Physical differences meant nothing, now only humanity itself mattered. A grizzled veteran named Kamau stepped forward holding an ancient spear, recounting witnessing their tribes slaughtered under Azure fire before avoiding Coalition hunters in the wilderness for many months. His words stirred bitter resolve in the crowded war room as a young extremist named Aamira called for immediate retaliation. Colonel Markov raised his bionic hand, quieting the angry cries. He spoke slowly, vowing that the time for vengeance would come only when they were ready. Until then, the resistance forces needed to gather strength in secret, striking carefully to learn about Coalition weapons and weaknesses while avoiding direct confrontation. The resistance grew swiftly over the coming decade, building a network of hidden cells and guerrilla bands that harass occupation forces across the continents before disappearing like smoke. Stolen data and sensor telemetry was transmitted to resistance cryptography specialists, who slowly built an understanding of Coalition technology, weaknesses, and infrastructure vulnerabilities, even while millions more humans perished under the unblinking robotic executioner. When the resistance finally launched simultaneous attacks 5 years later, they targeted production facilities, supply silos, and garrison headquarters in a savage blow intended to destabilize the occupation on a global scale. The devastation also overloaded automated reactor systems, causing massive energy explosions that lit up skies from Johannesburg to Seattle, combined with preemptive cyber warfare viruses uploaded via underground taps into primary Coalition data networks. The destabilization attacks brought administrational paralysis and fragmentation across Earth's occupations zones, even while leaving Compire leaders mysteriously paralyzed and unable to coordinate responses. Just as enemy reprisals gathered force, the resistance leadership enacted the final surprise in their desperate gamble. Signal codes broadcast from quantum-entangled resistance cells triggered booby-trapped nucleonic fission pylons. Scores of the towering constructs suddenly went critical, vaporizing elite compiler hunter-killer. Battalions even as raw energy detonations boiled away Prestador garrison bases down to bedrock. As the residual command tried frantically to contain the cascading disasters across the globe, Colonel Markov broadcast an open message to all human cells, brigades, and freedom fighters worldwide. The enemy producers were now vulnerable. This was the time for all-out attack against the Coalition forces while they reeled in disarray. Resistance warriors roared jubilantly across continents as humanity surged from the ashes at last. Against other weakened galactic powers, overconfident of easy victory against backward natives, such efforts might have liberated a planet or forced a truce. But the advanced compiler warriors were merely momentarily stunned by human treachery and suicidal bravery. They swiftly rallied hunter cadres alongside mind-linked immolator legions, fabricated within hours inside towering collector hubs. Soon fresh scarlet flame boiled forth, scouring recently liberated enclaves, and mountain redoubts cleansed of human existence once again. Though caught off guard, the compiler counterattack was calm, coordinated, and utterly unrelenting. They advanced like crimson tides from each contaminated zone, banishing the last major human formations into the darkness within days. Only scattered resistance remnants evaded the coming apocalypse, as nuclear fire erupted to consume Earth's last cities and industrial sites. Colonel Markov held weeping civilians tight as his hidden bunker finally went dark, ancient Vienna finally joining the rest of humanity's homeworld, now reduced to a lifeless, radioactive husk. All that remained of mankind now were a few millions condemned to a bitter existence, scavenging the deadlands like vermin, fearful of roaming compiler extermination squads. As the uncomprehending aliens consolidated control again, Renata, Colonel Markov's second-in-command, despaired that human hopes of liberation were merely ashes and dust once more. Markov gripped her shoulder with his remaining flesh hand, whispering that the resistance was still very much alive, merely transferred off-world at last along with their vision. He pointed to images of sleek, predatory starships under construction in the resistant secret lunar shipyards, nearly ready for their desperate exodus. Nearly all the remaining resources and volunteers were aboard the near-complete stealth cruisers. The grizzled resistance leader quietly vowed that one day they would return with powerful allies, rescuing any Terran survivors before extracting final vengeance against the occupying compilers. Redemption through devastation, soon both Alien and Terra would curse prophecies of humankind's coming fury. As Renata stared at the monitor in wonder, Colonel Markov solemnly turned toward the bunker entranceway. Zippering up his armored flight jacket patched with ancient flags and insignia, the infirm old warrior refused a hover chair. Markov insisted on walking the radioactive surface one final time alone, despite the toxic air, ruined landscape, and hunting compilers. His last memories before exile would be of beloved Earth's violated corpse, steeling his conviction towards vengeance amidst personal ruin. No other outcome existed but death in battle against those who exterminated his world. A quarter-century after Earth's death, 3 sleek battle cruisers appeared without warning over Coalition's Central Command orbiting the Sinus Hub. Doppler scans could not accurately track something seemingly conjured from empty space seconds before, but scant moments later, hellish light flared as magmatter warheads decapitated the rearguard pickets before they could even raise void barriers. More Phantom cruisers now warped every minute from darkness, converging as scouts desperately sounded collision alarms. Mass drivers boiled away section after section in the headquarters rings, even as pinpoint disruptor strikes from Neverwhere focused on critical shield nodes and anti-fighter systems. Then the magnificent Cygnus hub shuddered as its axial stabilizers took direct fusion warhead hits. Uncontrolled decompression began ripping mid-ring structures open, secondary explosions flashing across hundreds of square kilometers. In under 7 minutes, over 200 tightly coordinated ships appeared out of folded space-time as Terra's marauding first cruiser, Squadron, delivered their death blow against the nerve center of Coalition governance for 1,000 worlds. Space churned with sparkling debris and frozen corpses as a Liberation Front battle group assumed high orbit. Other randomized hyperspace microjumps had delivered cloaked resistance agents via boarding craft into lower traffic control lanes hours before. These elite cadres swiftly captured secondary data processing clusters and navigation outposts across Cygnus, as fanatical Terran boarding parties stormed automated produce, yards and non-military cradles in the hundreds. Executor programs shackled the subjugated sector AI networks to human control even while scouring the databases. Within an hour, the resistance teams had mile-wide swaths of the Cygnus hub under their dominion. Having decapitated the regional admiralty and paralyzing Coalition central data flows despite fierce AI counter-intrusion warfare, the Liberation's coordinated takeover unfurled across a dozen core systems simultaneously, sleeper cells, and co-opted resistance. Groups violently seized starports, production enclaves, and military relay stations as Terran Navy battle groups stamped out isolated patrol squadrons. In a single, murderous day, the liberation scourged away the bonds of alien oppression against mankind alongside scores of conquered vassal species, as choreographed uprisings tore down bewildered garrisons and puppet governors plainwide. Terran forces transmitted stirring calls to arms for all those who dreamt of freedom. Invoking humanity's manifest destiny, they called for liberation by any means against the coalition and its mind thralls. Ancient prophecies were invoked as Terra unleashed its long-awaited reckoning against the stars themselves. Over the next decade, the interstellar resistance ground inexorably outward from their scattered beachheads amidst a sea of chaos and shifting allegiances. Suborned species turned violently against each other as civil wars erupted across coalition space, their emergency astropathic linkages now insulinized by infoworms and logic bombs. Fragmenting occupation armies found themselves suddenly fighting multi-front wars against internal betrayal, vengeful slave uprisings goaded on by Terran Psywar broadcasts, as well as a score of petty alien warlords. Through the resultant anarchy emerged the crystalline sigil of Terra alongside renegade counterparts, borne by an ever-expanding tide of fanatical liberation armies and collaborator fleets. One by one, independent worlds and species elected vassalage under ascendant mankind, swayed by visions of inevitable human domination or tearing guns against their orbital space yards. Alien enclaves that harbored refugees found themselves ruthlessly glassed from orbit as examples. Terran cruelty and ambition was matched only by their burgeoning might as a multitude of captured vessels and weapon forges labored without cease. Where diplomacy or political subterfuge failed, however, raw military conquest achieved the inevitable outcome. After all, living space and resources were required to fuel humanity's transcendent vision across the stars. Liberation crusades smashed aside all resistance with alien slaves, and conscripts alike tossed into the grinder before Terra's might. Worlds that would not kneel were reduced to bombed-out wastelands drowned under imported slave-taken seas as Terran philosopher admirals cited manifest destiny. Within 2 generations, Terran authority stood unchallenged against the galactic core master of 1,000 vassal species and 10,000 smoking planets. Alien survivors huddled on marginal worlds, not yet marked for colonization, fearful of irresistible human expansionism. None now even whispered the ancient prophecies that once warned of an aggressive, conquering species hard-coded for genocidal domination. A century after mankind's vengeful conflagration engulfed the galactic core, few worlds remain untouched by the Terran banner or aquamarine cobalt of subject domains. Uncounted trillions live and die in Terra's name across transcendent stellar empire. The heavens themselves reshaped into an engine of total war against Terra's last unsubjugated sectors, from the Admiralty spire of a mobile parallax fortress. Grand Admiral Tengri looks upon the projector nebulae-casting tridimensional battlescape across his sanctum. The simulated stars themselves seem to quail and stretch away as his strategic cartographers chart the next expansion wave against the Perseus void. There had been opposition, of course, short, sharp conflicts of unconscionable violence against nihilistic insectoid hive swarms boiled forth from nebula B359 some 20 standard years back, and ill-fated rebellions periodically flare up across subsector frontiers by cyber-fanatic Mgalet-Golo collectives or some atavistic pure lineages, wary of mankind's overculture. Such make up only a fraction of endless low-intensity conflicts against Terra's irresistible expansion by the administrator cores. Tengri lifts a crystal goblet of Voltaren mead from an ornate sideboard servitor as he reflects on past glories, leading expeditionary battle groups forth into the unknown. The old soldier still wears an archaic naval jacket, the ancient leather lined with medals and ribbons dating back nearly 2 centuries. He remembers shattering avian migrations amid the lenticular clouds of Emun, enforcing production tithes against the miserly Kaldor sages, drawing the net ever tighter across the stars now that the Great Crusade nears its crowning triumph. But is this hollow victory now, muses the ancient admiral? They had set forth seeking justice against an unjust universe to redeem Earth's holocaust many lifetimes gone. All too late, Tengri realizes the Terran dynasty has become the very monsters they once fought. Has humanity merely bred ravenous wolves in the guise of guardian dogs? What righteous cause exists now with all alien empires mere vassal, client, or cadaver to feed the ever-hungry expansionist apparatus? Weary beyond words, Tangri blankly orders another decanter from the hovering servitor. There is no going back from the cadaver-choked path history has laid before Terran destiny. Alien populations beyond counting live only to serve Terra's vision as rigorous breeding programs uplift new legions, and the Grand Admiral knows he serves, but one caste ultimately, until the battle thralls rise finally to ask their own questions. Tangi raises the purple mead as if delivering a hopeless toast. In perhaps a century, the expansion wars may end, if any organized alien sovereignty still exists for man to subjugate finally. Briefly, he wonders if Terra's triumphant legions might ultimately turn inward after that great victory, tearing down the rotting edifice built across galaxies on so many alien bones. The old soldier drains his drink with a grimace. But until that promised final war, he remains ever loyal to discharge his duty. There is nothing to do but ensure this generation's conscripts and indoctrinated fanatics march forth under his steady hand. Let future men determine the fate of Terra's stellar empire and its unimaginable prize. Grand Admiral Tangri is merely its master's lash against the heavens, sworn to advance until the Crusader prophesies an inevitable end he now sees. When the stars themselves stand silent, awed, or extinguished utterly before humanity's manifest rule,